Thoughts on contest prep with a deficit for most, if not entirely, from LISS, given no time constraints to do cardio and no clear detriments to gym performance for someone who would prefer higher calories? So, in short, can I just cardio my deficit all the way through a prep without dropping my food too much?
Herman Poncer would say it's a bad idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there's a limit. There's a limit to how efficient cardiovascular activity can be. And, when low states of energy availability, that's going to, it's just going to exacerbate that. And it's not efficient. I think that's the biggest thing is like how it's not hard to eat a couple hundred calories less compared to like doing 200 extra calories worth of, especially low intensity cardio. Mm-hmm. That's like, 4,000 plus steps probably for most people. So it's like, it's substantial. I think this is another like hypothetical question that, I think you'd realize pretty quick wouldn't play out the way maybe you would hope. But I think, for some people, if their energy expenditure is very low as is, and it's like you're trying to create this necessary deficit, however you can, but reducing food intake further is like, they still have to be eating something, like increasing LISS amounts to greater degrees, I think can be helpful. But even then it's a difficult situation because if they have a low, energy expenditure, they're probably going to be smaller individuals more often than not, and they're going to be burning less through that. So I try to, when possible, have it be kind of a balanced split. Probably favoring diet to a larger degree to create the deficit. I can't think of a situation where I've had the deficit like entirely created, at least in a contest prep scenario where it's all from cardio.
Yeah, I kind of have three angles that I would tackle this question from. One is the psychological, which is probably most important. Two is the logistical, which is more relevant if you get past the psychological point that I'll get to. And then finally, there's the, hey, let's talk fun science stuff, which I'll get to as well. Psychologically, from a coaching perspective, if someone said to me, hey, I want to eat more food, I don't want to reduce my calories at all, so I want to diet purely from getting a lot of cardio in, I'd say now's probably not the time for you to diet. If the idea, like, because you have these two conflicting drivers. You're trying to get leaner. You're for whatever reason, you either want to compete, or you're not happy with your body, or your doctor said, hey, I think you'd benefit from this, or whatever reason. You also have a lot of resistance to that right now. If cutting 200-300 calories is something, you're like, nope, I'd rather do an hour of cardio. So to me, my first thought is you're probably not in a good headspace right now to diet. So I wouldn't suggest it. It's not going to go well. And if it does go well and you crush yourself with cardio, Biggest Loser style, you're probably going to regain a lot of weight because the energy deficit will still be there, as inefficient as it might be, and it will still create cravings. And you will still have all the same physiological adaptations that will just compound with your current psychological status where you're like, I don't want to touch my diet because I'm enjoying my food. So probably not a good play right now, just based upon the question for this individual to cut. And for coaches, I think this should be a little bit of a red flag if you could ask this question. Logistically, 100% agree with Brian. And just to give some numbers, average person who weighs like 160 something, 170 pounds, who's doing, an hour of cardio, if it's LISS, 200 calories.
Yeah.
So that kind of sucks. And it's just not very efficient. So you end up having to do some pretty gnarly amounts. I totally agree with Brian from a logistical perspective. People with smaller bodies who weigh less, they're going to have to do more cardio just to make sure that we don't have to dip down into like low micronutrient, low quality, high have some vegetables and lean protein only diets. although that often does inevitably happen with lower weight classes for bodybuilding. The final one, just scientifically, there are differences between quote unquote metabolic adaptation and energy compensation. And you can see people who are doing very high amounts of activity that are not necessarily experiencing massive amounts of weight loss or creating a huge energy deficit, where that does not create an additive effect. It creates a constrained effect on the energy expenditure. So they see reductions in energy expenditure from other things. Neat. Potentially even accelerating the processes that would look like metabolic adaptation as reductions come from other non-activity bases. So I think there's sufficient evidence to say that, yeah, if you were dieting and doing a ton of cardio, you might accelerate some of these adaptations that fight against weight loss more than if you were using a more even split of the two. So yeah, it wouldn't be my play. I think typically when I'm getting someone up into the 10 to 15,000 steps per day, going over that is something that I do cautiously. And just because it's also just less predictable. It's harder to be like, oh, if I add X number of steps, I'll see this amount of weight loss. Not that it's perfectly predictable with cutting calories, but it's there's a whole lot of hours in the day when you're awake that aren't the 1 hour of cardio you're doing, where you can find ways to trim calories. And that difference between, let me cut 200 calories from your intake doesn't seem as quickly and well able of the body to regulate against it. That's more of an anecdotal experience from watching people do insane amounts of cardio relative to how much you'd expect them to lose, but seeing more, still obvious reductions in weight loss from metabolic adaptations when cutting calories, but not to the same degree.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no clear detriments on gym performance. I think that only lasts so long. Like, yeah, if you're doing a 3-week cut or a month, but like if you have a 6-month prep at some point that
Case in
many
point,
steps.
Jeff hurt his foot using
Walking.
steps.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just it's literally like, I know it's just walking, but at some point that accumulation of volume, if you only increase over the short amount of time, which is still short, like prep, within 9 months of your life, if you just keep going, at some point, you might not be able to leg press or squat as much, I would gather.
Yeah.
Something's going to hurt
100%.
before, even if like you can do it, it's like, are you in pain?
Comfortable.
Yeah. At some point. Okay. Cool.